Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center by Raina Harp. The Space Coast. Florida has about 1,200 miles of coastline. Many of these coasts have special nicknames, like the Treasure Coast, the Gold Coast, and the Nature Coast. Perhaps you and your family have driven along the Atlantic to the east of Orlando. If so, you have been to the Space Coast, stretching from Palm Bay to Tisdale. This coast is home to Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center. It is the world center of space exploration. Welcome to Florida's Space Coast. Fasten your seatbelts. You're about to take a wild ride into the space age. Building Cape Canaveral. Cape Canaveral stories begins in 1940s across the country in New Mexico. The United States military was testing rockets. After a rocket crashed, the military knew it needed a new rocket range. Cape Canaveral is separated from mainland Florida by the Indian River, offers the perfect location. A cape is the point of land extending out into the ocean. Few people live in the region. Rockets could be launched over the ocean. The warm climate also allows launches to take place all year long. Workers constructed buildings, roads, runways, and launch pads. In 1950, the United States military sent out its first rocket from the new base at Cape Canaveral. The early years of Cape Canaveral, Spanish explorers gave Cape Canaveral its name when they visited the area in 1513. Canaveral means place of the cane. There are several kinds of plants in the area that look like sugar cane. The cape was an important landmark for sailors, and it appears on some of Florida's oldest known maps. Not until the mid-18th did the first American settlers arrive on the cape. Over time, a few small villages sprang up, but by the 1940s, the population of the cape stood at only about 100. Building Kennedy Space Center. In 1957, all eyes turned to space. The Soviet Union, a country that was made up of Russia and other countries, launched a satellite to orbit Earth. Americans were shocked that they had not produced the world's first satellite. Only a few months later, the United States sent up its own satellite from Cape Canaveral. The space race had begun. For the next few decades, the United States and the Soviet Union competed to make the most progress in exploring space. The two countries launched more than 5,000 spacecraft. To run the new space program, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration (NASA) was established in 1958. For its base at Cape Canaveral, NASA developed and launched spacecraft, but almost right away, NASA started running out of room. A physical look around for a new launch site. They considered many sites. White Sands, New Mexico had no outlet to the sea. Brownsville, Texas was too close to where people live. South Point, a Hawaiian island, was too far away and would cost too much money to build a site on it. In the end, NASA looked in its own backyard. Merritt Island was located just north of Cape Canaveral, across the Banana River. NASA got to work building a first-class spaceport or site for launching spacecraft. In 1965, the Kennedy Space Center officially opened for business. Kennedy Space Center. Today, NASA launches most of its space vehicles with crews from the Kennedy Space Center on Merritt Island. On Cape Canaveral, NASA and the United States Air Force launched spacecraft without astronauts aboard. However, to many people, the name Cape Canaveral means both the Cape and Merritt Island. Let's take a short tour of space headquarters and see some of the highlights of Kennedy Space Center. Millions of people from around the world come to the Kennedy Space Center to learn about the space program. Space shuttles are put together at the Vehicle Assembly Building. It is one of the largest buildings in the world and has 8 arches of floors. The crawler transporter weighs 6 million pounds and travels at 1 mile per hour. It carries the space shuttle from the Vehicle Assembly Building and the launch pad. From the viewing area, visitors to KSC can watch space shuttles lifting off from the launch pads 39A and 39B. Many of the launch pads are still being used today. Others are historic launch pads. Teams direct all launches from the Launch Control Center. The space shuttle lands on the shuttle landing facility as a glider. If the shuttle lands at another NASA site, a 747 jet carries it back to KSC. After landing, space shuttles go to the orbiter processing facilities. There they inspected, tested, and repaired before their next mission. Astronauts, satellites, and space probes. In the early 1960s, NASA set its sights on reaching the moon. On July 20, 1969, a spacecraft finally landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong was the first of only 12 people, all American astronauts, to set foot on the moon. In 1973, NASA launched Skylab, which was the first space station. The Skylab astronauts lived and worked above the space station for 171 days. They learned about the space environment and the needs of humans in space. In 1981, NASA opened a new era in space travel with the Space Shuttle program. The Space Shuttle is the only reusable spacecraft. Space shuttles have wings so they can glide back to Earth on the 3-mile-long runway at the Kennedy Space Center. Astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle carry out experiments and repair satellites. Some satellites, like the powerful Hubble Space Telescope, are put in place by the Space Shuttle. It has been orbiting Earth since 1990 and taking spectacular pictures of planets and other heavenly objects. In 1994, Hubble captured images of a comet crashing into Jupiter. Since the 1960s, NASA has also been launching space probes to make measurements and pictures of the planets and sometimes even land. For instance, rovers or robot vehicles on Mars have recently sent back photographs of landscapes covered with rocks, craters, and reddish-brown Martian dust. Satellites also help scientists study the Earth. Cameras on the satellite help scientists notice important changes on the Earth, like increased water pollution. Satellite pictures also show bizarre natural events on the Earth and even in Florida. Images have shown a mysterious pocket of water in Florida Bay that has changed color from blush green to black. Other pictures caught red tides along Florida's coast that were caused by dust from Africa's Sahara Desert. If you go to the NASA website, you can see this image, including what Florida looks like from space. The International Space Station, an ongoing NASA program, is the International Space Station, built in the 1990s. Space shuttles bring crews to and from the space station. Aboard the space station, astronauts carry out many experiments. They are eager to learn more about how to keep people in space healthy and safe. Hundreds of people on the ground also contribute to the program. At the International Space Center, some workers put the space station together and test equipment. Other workers partner with space programs from other countries. Astronauts also work in these buildings after they have trained on models at another NASA site, Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. They come to KSC to practice working with the actual machines and tools they will be using in space. Then they blast off. Over the years, NASA technology has led to many useful inventions that we use today. Some of this technology just makes doing things easier, but sometimes it actually saves lives. Scientists from the Kennedy Space Center have even worked with Florida Police Department. They had made video footage clearer and helped the police identify criminals. Infrared technology has proved to be a big help to Florida in many ways. The Florida Highway Patrol uses laser guns that beam infrared light to catch speeding drivers. Firefighters putting out blazes in large buildings, such as shopping centers, use an infrared camera placed on top of a high ladder. The pictures from this camera let firefighters see everything that is going on in the area. Even citrus growers use this technology. Planes carrying infrared cameras take pictures of growths. Computers then count the trees and identify unhealthy ones. The future of space. What does the future hold for the space age? No one can say for sure, but NASA has many plans. NASA's plans include sending robots and humans to explore the moon. NASA hopes to one day explore Mars as well. Crews aboard the International Space Station are experimenting with growing plants in space. Plants are necessary for life on other planets because they provide food and oxygen. Someday, NASA may lead the way in space settlement. The Kennedy Space Center is also helping other communities and countries build spaceports. NASA believes that in the future, people and goods will travel by spaceflight. NASA sees a future world in which spaceports around the globe will launch many spacecraft each day. You cannot look into the future and see what the space age will bring, but you can look into the space program. Today, the Kennedy Space Center opens its doors to millions of tourists. These visitors welcome the chance to learn more about space development, examine space gear, and experience the thrill of seeing a spacecraft launch. Over the years, thousands of people have settled in the towns also along the space coast. These people combine their skills to create the space program at Kennedy Space Center. Perhaps one day you'll join them as a researcher, a scientist, an engineer, or even as an astronaut. Glossary Cape, a point of land extending out into the ocean. Satellite, an object launched to orbit Earth or another heavenly body. Space race, a physical competition between the United States and the Soviet Union to explore space and land on the moon. Space shuttle, a reusable spacecraft that can carry people and cargo. Space station, a human-made structure orbiting in space that people can live in for several months. Technology, the use of scientific knowledge to solve practical problems.